open, and thank you all for your attendance today, albeit virtually. So firstly, a very warm welcome to the council staff, especially to Angela, and great to make your acquaintance, Angela, to the elected members. And I don't see any members from the public, but if there are any, we will mention them by name. Jeff's also joining us just to talk to one of the matters. So Jeff may not necessarily remain online for the entire meeting, but we will invite Jeff to speak on one of the matters. At this time, just a reminder in terms of the meeting protocol, the meeting is being recorded. If I can also please ask anyone and everyone to switch off their mobile phones or switch them to silent to avoid any disturbances. And also today, just due to the nature of a virtual meeting, if and when you would like to speak to a matter or be heard, can I just ask you that you raise your hand, as in your real hand, not your virtual hand? That way I will know that you need to be addressed. And so without further ado, we will kick off with order of business item number 2, apologies. I have apology from Sharon Binns. Arlene, are there any other apologies other than Sharon?
Mayor Graham has sent his apology.
Mayor Graham. Angela?
Just to let you know, I might need to hop off at 4 o'clock for about 15 minutes for another meeting, but then I will join you again after that.
Okay,
so
thank you, Angela.
I'll just join back in.
Thank you very much for that. So we've got an apology from Mayor Graham, an apology from Sharon Binns. Brian's just joined us. Good day, Brian.
Hi there.
And we've got, who we got at the bottom there? Is it Kayla?
Yes, Keela McDuff.
Hi, Keela. Are you representing council? Are you a member of the public, or are you with the media?
I spoke with Arlene earlier. I'm a reporter for the Timaru Herald.
Right. Well, welcome. Good to have you online as well. Great. So, so can, just in terms of the order of business, can I just have somebody please move that those apologies be accepted? Thank you, Matt. And a seconder? Chris, thank you. So moved. We'll move on then to item number 3, public forum. I don't see any members of the public connected, and I'm not aware of any matters that are pending to be addressed. Or Chris or Carol or Matt, from your side, are there any matters? Right, so that makes it nice and quick and easy. So without further ado, we will move on to item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest to note? Right, so no declarations of interest. We will move on to item 5.1, minutes of the last Lake Tekapo Community Board meeting held on the 14th of July. Are there any changes, corrections, or additions to be noted on those? Happy, Chris? Happy, Carol? Matt? Great. So can I have somebody please move that those minutes be accepted as an accurate record? Matt, thank you. Second, Chris. So moved. We will now move on to item 5.2, the Community Board Financial Report. So for those that have an agenda in front of them, we are on page 13. In fact, what I am going to do, just out of respect to Jeff, because Jeff has kindly joined us, I'm just going to pause on the financial report for now and just invite Jeff to respond to a matter that was raised under general business at our last meeting related to concern of a rust or metallic taste in the drinking water. Jeff, would you like to just respond to that matter?
Thanks, Steve. Yes, there was a member of the public did contact us and asked and said that she had some rust in the water. We did investigate. We found a little bit of flake from rust. It's probably come from a galvanised pipe, which would be most likely on her side of the boundary. The council does have some pipes that are galvanised and that, but they'll be replaced in the next coming pipe renewal that's going slated for that area. So that will take away that and we'll replace up to the boundary, but that issue could still carry on if they don't replace the galvanised inside their boundary. Usually what happens in this case is probably a holiday home. The water's turned off, it sits in the pipe and it rusts a bit more. And when they open it up and full bore tap, it breaks the little flecks off and comes into the water. So if it's used all the time, it's not an issue, but if it sits idle and then used sometimes, then that's when the issue comes in. So we had a look at it. The drinking water assessor was there. He also saw it. He was happy. We're not failing any tests, so the water is safe to drink.
Thank you for that, Jeff. Chris, I think you might have had some background to that. Does that raise the concern? Or at least allay the concern?
Yes, I'll pass that on. Yeah, definitely. The tests, Jeff, you're just saying the tests have all been clear when run.
Yep. And we haven't had a fail, and we are testing for E. coli and coliforms, and there's nothing in the water at all for that. And we had plenty of chlorine in the system.
Yeah.
We're trying to keep it to where it's not too high, but we do have plenty of chlorine in the system, so there's nothing wrong with the water at all. It's all perfectly good. Plus it goes through UV, so it's even protozoa compliant. It should be.
Thank you for that, Jeff. And am I correct that there's still a pending upgrade in the pipework along Orangi Crescent or close to Orangi Crescent?
That's what I said. There is some pipe to be renewed going from the bottom of Orangi up to the top, past the school, past the community board, along the side there, and where it goes down behind those storage sheds. All that AC is slated to be renewed, and there's already a line on the opposite side of the road. It just needs to be hooked into the system either end, and then the people on the other side will have their laterals coming off that, and all the galvanised that runs in the road there will all be taken off the system.
Very good. Thank you, Jeff. Carol, anything from your side?
No, I'm fine.
All good, Matt? Okay. Jeff, thank you very much for that. You are very welcome to stay online, but if you need to leave, certainly understand that as well. Thank you.
Thanks. No worries. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. So we'll shift back to 5.2, Community Board Financial Report on page 13 of the agenda. I'll take it that that report has been read and just open it up for any general questions or comments. What I might do is just pass it over to you, Chris, for anything from your side.
Yes, I just had two questions for that. One, and I note that the 2022 budgets have yet to be set, so taken in that context. First question was, we just talked about the prior to balance date, but prior to the 30th of June, we talked about the appropriateness of the township's project budget being used for the bike stands as part of the foreshore development. And I just wanted to question as to whether those remaining funds from 2021 can be applied to that project rather than out of the new funds. So that was the first question. And then the second question being the grant allocations. There's a closing balance for 2021 of 1,207.19. And again, whether that can be carried forward are my two questions. Otherwise, I think wait till the new budgets come out.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Tim, are you able to speak to that matter?
Look, in terms of the use of the funds for the bike stands, I don't see any issues. I'll just check in and make sure that it's all able to be done, but I don't see too many issues about using that for that particular project. In terms of the carryover of the grant money, Arlene will probably know better than me, but my assumption is that's getting carried over as a matter of course, but Arlene will know better.
Arlene, are you able to shed some light on that?
Yes, none of the carry forwards have been done yet. They haven't gone to council yet. I think there's a hold up because of the delay in the long-term plan, but I'm not quite sure how that works. So everyone is, the finance department and myself are totally aware that all of these grant funds need to carry forward, including your one. So I don't see any problem. I think Angela has something to add.
Yep. Just to advise, I know the guys are right in the middle of the annual report, so they are running a bit behind in terms of timelines, and I know that they're working their way through the carry forwards. So they're about 2 or 3 weeks behind schedule. So we will make sure that that gets brought to their attention.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Arlene. Thanks, Tim. Anything else, Chris?
No, I think we'll wait until they've done their job.
Right. Okay. So we will take that report as be received and accepted. Thank you, Eileen. Can I have somebody move that report be received and accepted? Thank you, Chris. Second. Carol, thank you. Moving on to item 5.3 on page 16. So Brian, thank you, Brian, for your report. We'll take that report as read. And at this time, I'll just ask Brian if there's anything he wants to add to that report before we just open up for general questions on the report.
No, fairly self-explanatory. The main one is, I guess we've got actively working on is this Diagiac Reserve, which we're just finalising the specifications, getting that ready to go out to market for some pricing up for some contracting, so we can get that underway in the coming months, get that done. So that's probably the main one of interest, I think. Any questions?
I'm particularly interested in the lakefront progress.
I can give a bit of an update on that. So we've, before we progress work, just due to the nature of the land packages on the lakefront, we asked the property group to just go through and do a check on all the land packages and ownership of parcels of land and status of parcels of land. So we didn't start building things on other people's property, essentially. And we have that back. And I'm not committing to be as smart as being able to share a screen, but I'll try and share a screen here and see how we go, and show you a snapshot. So we do have one challenge, and I'll see if I can you see that?
Yes, you can.
Beautiful. The actual document with a couple of photos in it, pictures like this that show the whole area is, I think, about 15 megabytes or something. So the house lights dimmed when I was downloading it. So I managed to get this snippet, which shows one of the challenge areas we've got. So if you can, so the blue colour is council owned land. The pink colour is freehold land, and the green colour is dock land. So you'll see we've got a pathway and a roadway at the moment on dock land. So back in about 2008, it looks like council stopped the road in front on the foreshore, and for some reason that we're trying to track down, that piece of land was transferred to the Department of Conservation. So we're wanting to put some construction across that in terms of your pathway. So we need to have a conversation with them, or change the pathway essentially to put it onto council land. So we're just trying to connect in with DOC and have that conversation, and work through that. So we haven't had a chance to have a talk to them yet. Look, we don't foresee it being an issue, but we just thought we'd better go and have a conversation first. And also trying to have a conversation with Waka Kotahi about when they're going to be doing their construction of footpaths and pathways, to see if there's any ability to tie it in together. But I suspect by the time they actually get there, it'll be sometime in the new year, and we might want to move faster than that if we can. One of the options is to do it in 2 stages and leave that bit in the green out, but that will be mobilising and demobilising a contractor twice, which is probably not a good thing. That's just be extra cost. So that's kind of where we're sitting at the moment. Before we can progress anything, just making sure. There's a couple of other little issues that came out in terms of tidying up land transfers and easements and things that also got identified by the property group, but nothing that stands in the way of rolling out the projects, with the exception of this interesting outcome.
Thank you, Tim. Carol?
So, sorry, Tim, just to be clear, did you say there's a chance this might get deferred until the new year?
No, one of the things I was hoping was that we could maximise the work by working in with the Transport Agency when they did the footpaths and upgrades, but I think they're going to take too long. So we just need to crack on, have this conversation with DOC, see if there's any issues with forming up what we've got in terms of crossing their land. As I say, I can't see it being a significant issue, and then move forward. I mean, we didn't expect that green area. It seems unusual. We're trying to find some documentation to understand why it was transferred to DOC. But look, that's what happens in these land package things. And when you check on this stuff, it can throw up some results like this. So,
that's not reserve land status, is it?
No, it's not. It appears to have been, it's a road that was stopped and then transferred ownership to the Department of Conservation. So I'm not sure of the level of awareness across a number of things that have been done in terms of that was actually DOC's or why it would be. But I mean, we just need to have that conversation. It's just the right thing to do, and sort it out. So it's all done properly. So we just don't want to, strike issues when we get through this particular work. The rest of it's fine. No issues at all. Anything that's not coloured there will be Crown land, so the foreshore land. So that's not too much of an issue. So, but those little areas where you see us popping over the into that area, we just need to cover that as well. But that's not a drama. We can just pull the track in.
Tim, it might be useful to have a chat with Phil Brownie from DOC. He kind of knows everything there is to know about Tekapo.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, good suggestion, Carol. Yeah. Anything else, Carol?
No.
I could possibly just add from earlier conversation or some notes there was regarding Lakeside Drive trees. There was some concern expressed that we weren't going to remove too many trees, which is not the intention. It's really just to look at them to see what maintenance is required, and if there are any that are in poor condition or potentially unsafe, we might remove some of those, but then just do maintenance on the other trees. Katie had indicated we may need to remove some for the alignment of the trail, but we probably just need to get on site with her and try and finalise that alignment, and also get the arborists on site to do an assessment and provide their advice, and then confer back with you to in terms of what we're kind of actually proposing to do. So that's kind of really the intention there. So certainly not the intention to remove more than, or really any trees particularly, unless there's something unsafe or just not good structurally safe.
Brian, just so you probably already know this, the Community Board and the Council did an assessment, I guess in our last term, and we went along near Anderson Way and removed unsafe trees, poorly growing trees, and we kind of had a crack at them then. So hopefully there's not too much more to come out.
Okay, I know I wasn't aware of that, but there was some of the sort of, even some of the other, like the willows that are potentially growing down on the lake edge and might be indigenous land that are all a bit untidy and messy, which I'd quite like to tidy up, just to, like we talked about, make it look like it's a maintained parkland rather than not quite so much. But yeah, there's not a huge amount of concern that I've seen of these remaining sort of pine trees. It's more that peripheral stuff and some of the scrubby stuff that's down towards the hot springs. It's kind of what do we do with that to make it look as though it's cared for in a way. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Brian. I know that this may appear a bit further down, but we may as well talk about it now while we have handed the floor to you. Just in terms of rabbit control, I'm aware that obviously the Lake Alexandrina program has been completed, but at our last community board meeting, there was a further conversation about the need for additional rabbit control around the Lake Tekapo township. And the general feeling was that, poisoning would be the way to go, provided the right levels of information were sent out prior. Has anything further happened with that?
No, I haven't progressed that. But it's reasonably, once we get into it, there's quite a bit of work involved in with community liaison and making it all work. So with other priorities, I haven't been able to progress at that at this point of time. But certainly still sort of where we need to try and do something.
Matt, I remember last meeting you raised it. I take it that is still, in your view, a priority for the township?
Yeah, I think so, Steve. Yeah, the little bit of rabbit control that we did see a couple of months ago, I think had some impact, but little, I think, on the grand scheme of things. And I think it's one of those jobs that we just need to keep on chipping away at. I don't think we can really afford just to sit back and rest when they're certainly this time of year when we've got the potential to try and get on top of it somewhat. So I say we need to keep the pressure on and somehow work on the eradication of the rabbits if we can.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you, Brian. The Diashak Reserve development, just note that you've obviously procured some of the furniture, which is great news. Also have seen that the new or the final version of the map that's been put out. Just wondering, Brian, in terms of timeframes at this stage, do we have any indication of when work is likely to begin, alert levels permitting?
I do have some dates in our procurement plan, which I just can't quite recall off the top of my head. It'll depend on the availability. We're really saying we want it completed by the end of November to the contractors, so they'll need to come back and say they can do it in that time frame. So that's really what we're looking at. So I'm not certain about a start date. That would depend on a number of things, but it's more the end date. We're really aiming for the end of November to have it all done. There was a little bit of finalisation of a couple of the tree species, which I was hoping to do this week before this meeting, but haven't got onto that. Sorry. So we'll do that as well with those that are interested. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. Chris, anything else from your side on Brian's report?
No, I think that no, nothing more.
Cool, Carol.
No, I'm a bit hot under the collar about the rabbits because they're now ring-backing established trees and it's just dire and they're about to explode again. But they're already, the nests are already there.
Yeah.
So lots of unhappy locals and quite a few guns around.
So definitely a priority, and I think we have got that on the agenda for discussion later, so we'll definitely turn that into a very clearly defined action. Thank you, Carol. Anything else for Brian?
No, that's good.
All good. Thank you, Brian. Thanks for your work in the report, mate.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 5.4, Tekapo school hire charge. And thank you, Brian, for your report and your recommendations on that. So just a quick reminder, last meeting there was some conversation around two elements. The one was waiving of existing invoices that the school did not understand they would need to be paying for use of the hall. So there was just a conversation around potentially waiving those charges. And the second part of that conversation was whether it was within the community board's delegation authority to approve the school use of the community hall at no charge to the school other than provision of grants. At the last meeting, we needed to seek some clarification. So thank you, Eileen, and thank you, Brian, for the work that's gone into this report. So I think today, in terms of item 5.4, we'll take that report as read because it's a fairly comprehensive, detailed report, and thank you for that detail. And I think there's effectively two decisions, the way I read it, that need to potentially be made. And the one is obviously a resolution around a credit to be passed for the existing invoices that have not yet been paid by the school. And in the second part or component, that will be a decision around if and how the community board potentially could assist the school with its use of the community hall in some shape or form. Brian, is that accurate and correct in terms of the summation?
Yes, that's pretty good summary. Thanks. Yes. So just comment. We sort of acknowledge there was some confusion around the agreement. so it's probably reasonable to just try and move beyond that and waive those existing fees. But there's interesting discussion, I guess, or potential various interpretations of the council's policy around the community board's delegation to change or offset fees, which Tim might want to talk to some more, but we believe that's not really the intention, that the community board could simply do that. And if it's wanting to waive fees, the usual approach for most of the other community boards, if they want to help organisations with the cost of hall hire and other things, is to provide a grant. Beyond that, you would need to convince the council that there was some greater need, or to assist the school in a greater way than that, without using that grant. Back to council, we believe, would be the approach.
Thank you, Brian. Tim, is there anything you wanted to add to that before we invite the community board members to speak?
Look, not really. Chair, I think, as Brian indicated, look, we went through the delegations and went through the process around fees and charges and had a good internal conversation. So we didn't just, it wasn't one that's over lightly. I had a chat with, in conversation with Angela about this, and chatted with Brian about it, and read through the delegations and checked everything out. And it appears, relatively clear that the intent of the policy or intent of the delegation to the community board is around the policies for the buildings, rather than the actual fees and charges, which is set by delegation through council and community consultation. And I guess that's kind of, as I say, just wanted to make sure you're aware wasn't a flippant turnaround of it. We did have a good think about it, and can certainly see where there's maybe some tidying up and wording around that delegation to make it really clear, but that was our read of it.
Thank you, Tim. So what I might do is just go across the community board members and firstly open up, Chris, to you, if there's anything you'd like to add to the conversation.
Yeah, I think one of the final part of the conclusion says, if the Tekapo Community Board believes there is a valid reason to provide a special reduced rate or free use of the Tekapo Community Hall to the school, then this needs to be referred to the council for approval. Is that if the community felt there was valid reasons, would that be a reasonable avenue to take, and how would we go about that?
Look, there would be, I mean, as the report's outlined, it's, people are free to approach council and propose the waiving of a fee and charge, and it's up for council to consider that, I imagine. I mean, the offset of that is it costs what it costs, and would need to recoup the funds from somewhere else. And I guess that's the crux of it. I'm saying, council will pay. Well, council gets its funding from rates. So if we offset for one group, it has to be recouped from another. It's just not possible, or the fee and charge itself be increased for the community and the other users to offset for this particular. There has to be some mechanism for recouping the costs to operate the scheme, and that's what would need to be considered in parallel with giving a group a cheaper or a no-cost use of a facility.
Chris?
Right. Well, I guess the fact of the matter is that the hall is probably empty, or I would say 99.9% empty, and not recovering any fees anyway at the time that the school may use this. So I can't see that there'd be a loss of revenue as a result of some limited use by the school. So I guess, I'm not sure about the loss of revenue needing to be covered by other community groups. And the second thing, I guess, is that the school doesn't have if you look at our other villages, Twizel and Mackenzie, they've both got school halls access. Our school doesn't. whether we can take that into factor. And also, I guess, the close connection of the school, with the school pool and just how we operate. Would there be some valid reasons that council might consider?
Well, look, I think that's all valid, Chris, in terms of an appropriate conversation about that and who pays for what. I mean, we calculate the fees and charges and the level of those based on the usage and historic usage and balance it up against the level of cost recovery. So it is a balance. So because it's empty, we try and organise it and charge that way. My understanding, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, is Twizel Area School uses the Twizel Community Centre and pays for that, and the pool, and pays the usual usage fees for that as well. So there is that, and also saying that, look, ratepayers / taxpayers pay through their taxes for the Department of Education to fund the appropriate level of educational facilities for communities. So one of the approaches could be, why are we paying twice for the same thing? So it's just, but I don't think there's any issues about having a wider conversation about uses of facilities. And I think that's a really healthy conversation and appropriate conversation to have. It's just making it really clear. And I think the confusion or the challenges in this particular space is these verbal agreements that create these sorts of things. And let's just sit down, have a proper conversation, work together, work out how it works, work out who pays what, and write it down. And then it's got some longevity then, and it doesn't matter who's sitting around this table. There's a piece of paper that says this is what the school uses and this is what we use. I mean, the school's great to deal with and in terms of a number of things, and there's no challenges there. This is just about making sure we get it right, really, and the costs are clear and usage is clear. That's all.
Just looking at the revenue and financing policy, 20 to 40% of the revenue comes from user charges, and the residual comes from targeted rates in terms of the works and services rate. So there is latitude to pass some of these costs into the targeted rates, over time. And I do think there is a case to be made where there are community organisations. I certainly know in other councils where I've worked, where there's community organisations that are doing things for the community. There are cases that can be made to council to waive some of those fees. So I think it is really making the case and bringing that to council's attention. So things like probably a school production, which is for the community, or if there's a meeting to do with the school, it could be something that you make a case for.
Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you, Chris. Carol, anything you want to add from your side?
I think you pretty much covered off my thoughts. I certainly understand MDC's stance in relation to what's been existing or the confusion and whatnot. There's not really much argument there, but I do think we have, there can be a good case made for some use for the school, support for the school, in the absence of other facilities. And the other bigger towns do have facilities that we don't, and also larger school populations too, to help pay for. But I presume, Tim, it's an opportunity cost that you look at with the cost of hiring the hall rather than the actual cost, which wouldn't be very much. So anyway, I'm be really keen to put a case to council in support of the school in this.
Thank you, Carol. Matt, anything from your side?
I think most of the points have been well covered. I think under, as Tim pointed out, under current policy, the cost of the usage of the hall has to come from somewhere, and I don't think we should be robbing Peter to pay Paul, unless we can find some fine-tune the policy that Angela just mentioned, to allow for these types of usages. I think looking at the historical fee that that the school owes, I think as per the recommendation, I think that absolutely should be waived due to the ambiguity around the arrangement. And then moving forward, again, as it's been indicated, I think it would be a reasonable expectation that for the events that benefit the community as a whole, such as productions, nativities, the like, I think it would be perfectly acceptable to approach the Tekapo Community Board for a grant to cover the costs of those type of events and formal production type scenarios. As for the rest of the time, yes, MOE do have a budget themselves, I believe, that is available to the school to pay for such things as community hire. So I think, as has been suggested, a conversation needs to be had around the policy. And in the meantime, I think we'll have to look at it case by case from a community board grant process, I think.
Right. So I think at this time then, Arlene, if you could just provide a bit of guidance here. I think what we need to do is formulate a resolution firstly in terms of the outstanding payments of invoices. Would that be correct, Arlene? We could possibly just formulate a resolution now to pass a credit on those invoices, because I think, you know, all the thinking around that is in the same direction. Would you agree with that process, Arlene, just in terms of governance?
Yeah. Yes, I don't know if you can see my screen. I have the current resolutions up on the screen, so we can work on those. Number 2, that the current outstanding fees payable by the school be waived due to the confusion regarding the previous agreement due to it not being documented or having a defined conclusion. Would you like to make any changes to that one, or perhaps just move in second?
I think we could just move and second that in its present form.
Okay.
So can I have someone move that, please?
Happy to do that.
Chris. Move, and the seconder, please. Carol, thank you.
Can I just make one comment here? I think we'd probably need to add into there, because it's not within your delegation, that you'd submit a report to council for this to happen.
Right.
So I could just add that on as a sentence there.
To submit a report to council requesting that the current outstanding fees. So does that cover that for you, Angela?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Angela.
Number 3, we'd probably need to rewrite this one. What would you like?
I heard 2 messages there. I heard one from Chris and I heard a slightly different one from Matt. So what I heard from Chris was that we as a community board would like to prepare a paper to deliver to council, effectively supporting why we believe there's a valid reason to provide a special or reduced rate or free use of the community pool. Chris, did I get that right?
Yes.
Yep. So, and as part of that, we'd obviously consult with the school to, again, just determine the current use. It just might be less of a, you know, might be more of a moot point than we realise.
It's a view that there is expressing a view that there is a valid, I'm afraid I didn't quite get that wording from you, Mr. Chair.
Reason to provide a special reduced rate or free use of the Tekapo Community Hall to the Tekapo School. That is on the bottom of page 21 of Brian's report under conclusion.
So does that sum up what you're wanting to say?
Yes, my understanding is that the community board will actually prepare that report for staff to consider.
Okay, so you would not asking staff to prepare that report, you would like to do that yourself?
That's right. Community board will prepare the report for staff to consider. Is that in line with your thinking, Chris?
Yes, we can just provide some feedback. It says, as I said in the paper, if the community board believes there's a valid reason, then they need to be referred to council. So if we just, summarise what we believe are valid reasons, then council will decide ultimately.
Thank you. Carol, you happy with that? Matt, you okay with that? Okay, thank you.
A mover and seconder, please.
So, Chris, will you move that? And
yes,
seconder? Seconder? Matt, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Right, so thank you, and thank you again, Brian, for your work on that report. So we'll move on to item 5.5, general business and councillor updates. We're on page 22. And Eileen, you're the author of that report.
Okay.
The updates on possibly what we'll do is just run through those top to bottom. And we'll start off with the RSHAC reserve. I think Brian's already spoken to that. Is there any other questions for Brian on that matter? All happy? Okay. Next item, rabbit control. We've also spoken to that matter. Carol, there was a question around the possibility of resurrecting the existing rabbit-proof fence that's in pretty much a battered and tattered state, but I think you asked that question.
Yes, and Brian might not be aware of it. Almost all the way along the back of the village, certainly the old village, there is a rabbit-proof fence. And the wire and whatnot's all sort of pushed down and is a bit battered, but there's also rabbit-proof fencing around the dock block behind Lochinvar. So yes, I'm just wondering if there might be any merit in restoring it, if that could possibly help. I know State Highway 8 is always going to be an access point, but is it worth having a look at it or talking with some of the locals who know more about it than I do?
All I'd say, no, I wasn't really aware of that, but it's probably just will form part of that wider conversation when we get into it about what are all the measures we could take. So whether that's worth doing, it's not worth doing, top of my head, without doing other work in the town, which is typically we're looking at poisoning to be something effective. And then we've also sort of alluded to that we need to do that in conjunction with adjoining property owners. So if that is actually happening and well in tandem, then the rabbit-proof fence may not be so important. So I guess you'll just have to take that into account. But obviously the rabbit-proof fences would be quite a cost, and we don't really have any significant budget for rabbit control either, which is another issue, a part of the conversation, because it's not typically actually council's responsibility as such, but there is really no responsibility anywhere, so it ends up falling to council, it seems, is the best sort of organisation where everybody's looking for a solution to.
So who would council have employed the guy who did the poisoning the last time, whose name I do remember, by the way?
We've done the poisoning at Lake Alexandrina. Is that what you mean? I'm not sure who did the poisoning.
No. We did Pindone poisoning up behind the village. It's probably 5 years ago now, okay, which was pretty effective. So that was Graham Larkham who did that professionally. Yep. So there should be a record of that somewhere.
Angela?
Can I just find out, given that there is funding for pest control, is this something that we could sort of target a funding application from, from Predator Free or something like that?
Yeah, it's all. Look, I think there's multiple mechanisms, and multiple agencies. I think Angela is, and that's what I think Brian's alluding to. There's lots of different players in this space, so it's trying to clear some headspace and workspace to be able to go and have those conversations. And then when you start doing that, you do get, it does take quite a bit of time to corral everybody together and try and have a logical conversation. And unfortunately, I mean, as you all know, a rabbit's not going to stop if we control it on our land. So, if we go hard out, we've got to do it as a multi-agency community initiative so that everybody controls at the same time in the same way for it to be effective. And I think, we can do some ad hoc stuff, but what Brian was trying to do was have a more structured and consistent approach. And I know it's frustrating, but we always tend to say this, but we've only got limited bandwidth, and just trying to, do all these things just takes time. It's unfortunate, and particularly when it's not, there's not a lot of funds are set aside for it. And I mean, it's probably getting to be a well worn out excuse, but just trying to find the time and to get around to agencies that have got this sort of responsibility as part of the work that needs to be done, and then looking for, as you say, funding. So look, if it's something that the community board wants to champion, or the community wants to champion and get support, I mean, there might be other ways of doing it, I don't know.
Matt?
Just with respect to the specific point, in terms of the resurrection of the rabbit-proof fence, there is an early conversation which is happening with another agency around wallaby fencing in the district. And I specifically spoke to this rabbit-proof fencing point when the discussion was had, in that if we were to wallaby-proof, we would need to rabbit-proof at the same time using the same hardware. So it's something that may come to fruition in the future. But I think in the meantime, I agree we need a combined approach, but I actually do believe that ad hoc rabbit work needs to continue in order to keep some kind of a lid on the numbers, whilst we're trying to line all our ducks up with all these other people that we're trying to align with, because we all know how long that can take. By the time we get to a sensible point where we're all fully aligned and have the funds in place, we'll have another couple of million rabbits running around the district. So
couldn't agree more.
Angela?
In Kakara, a lot of this type of work would get done by community groups, and it would be community led. So Tim's point is valid, to actually sort of get a coalition of the willing with some agencies involved to give a bit of support and facilitate it. But then, that could be a way that we actually do get some wins on the board, and we actually can get this, we can get some work done on this, because I do know it is an issue in Tekapo.
Carol, do you believe we've got the ability to reach out to?
I wonder if we could chat with the Te Manahuna Araki trapping group, because there's a number of experts there. Well, if it is a possibility that we can have a community-led initiative, then there are certainly some bodies who might be willing to organise something.
Right, so can I suggest then that what we'll do outside of this meeting is just set up a time for the community board to explore options, reach out to relevant parties, and then potentially come up with a draft plan to pass back to council for comment and approval. Is that acceptable? Tim, would that be in order?
I think that'd be really helpful from our point of view, I think. So anything like that we can support would be great, and just take a bit of pressure off some of the stuff that Brian has to do.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Angela. Brian?
If I could just add from where we got to before, was that, well, we could do some more shooting. I didn't feel that was overly effective for the cost. It's sort of relatively simple, but as Matt's suggesting, that showed we're doing at least something might control them to some extent. Probably felt the most effective method is going to be poisoning, which we can do, but if we start doing that through the township, we're equally likely to get some pushback from people being concerned about pets being poisoned from the that baiting and from dead rabbit carcasses. I think it's more the issue. So you're going to get this dual sort of issue arising, which when we get into it, we've got to be well prepared and do some good education around and management all around that. So it's like picking up carcasses. So it's just, again, quite a bit of organisation to get all that together and working really well before we could just launch into it. So that's why you're a little bit reluctant without some resource and the time to get into it. As once we start, it'll just, as Tim alludes, it snowballs into really what's required. So it's just my perspective on what is the best way forward. But if we can start to organise that, the community-led project, and understand that's really where the best place is probably to go and to head in that direction, and then ideally do that in conjunction with the neighbouring station owners and Department of Conservation. So it gets quite involved.
Thank you, Brian. Angela?
I think Brian's hit the nail on the head, is that you probably need to get a sort of group of willing people to get involved, sit down, scope out what the plan could look like. You'd probably need a comms plan to go with that, so you can talk to owners and you can feed them some information. So I think if you could do that, and it's community-led with some agencies that help and facilitate, and some organisations, community organisations that take an interest in this, you could probably also source some funding as well. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but at least then you've got a plan and you've got some ideas of how you can approach this proactively from a community. Because I do know what Tim is saying is true. We've got limited budgets and we've got limited resources, so it's really, really difficult to try and get to everything.
Appreciate that. Thanks for those insights, Angela. Well, I think we'll leave the conversation there, and we will set up a separate meeting. And Carol, I might ask you to lead that for us, just in terms of setting up a meeting at appropriate time to get the relevant people in the room. Thank you. Pioneer Drive landscape work. Brian, I think at our last meeting, you were hoping to actually have a catch up with us, I think, on site, and obviously that hasn't happened for very good reason. Was there anything more you wanted to add to that at this time? Is that catch up still needed?
Yes, it would be good to have a look at that area and just try and get a handle on how we want to maintain it. Because it's one of those little messy areas, but like the waterfront, doesn't look as well as it could look, but there's different views on how it should be maintained and what standard. So yeah, it's not urgent. It's sort of the way it's been for a while. So, but it's just, one thing we could sort of look at in the spring when it's a bit warmer to get out and about. Next time, maybe having a walk around and other things.
Thank you, Brian. Free Waters reform. Chris, was that your request for an update on Free Waters reform?
Yeah, well, just yes, I guess it was, but I don't know whether there's anything additional to add than what's been in the media or in the update, just that it's very topical in the community, and it might be useful to have an update of where the council's at with that consultation process.
Yeah, look, happy to do that. And I think just noting that in the next day or two, council will be launching a website, or part of its website will be dedicated to presenting information to the community about the process. And on that website will be all the presentations that staff have been giving to council at workshops as well, and just sharing everything that we can share to try and get the community as well informed as we possibly can as we go through this process. We've been working really hard, and Angela will be able to come in on this conversation as well, and Matt, of course, to inform council about the water reform process. We've been collating information and presenting to them every week, and probably overloading the councillors with information as we've been overloaded with information on this process. It's just a constant stream of data and different things coming at us. But boiling it all down, as you would have read the Mayor saying in the media, that council's had 4, and it's now got 5 bottom lines that it's measuring this reform against. And that's really useful from a staffing point of view, because we can take all the information and distill it down and say, does it meet these bottom lines? And they're around no detrimental effect on the community, making sure that all the costs are met, not leaving stranded assets behind. They're about making sure that the community has a voice, which is a really significant issue in the whole process. When they're talking about a water entity the size of the South Island, give or take. So there really is a real challenge in that particular aspect of the reform. And recently, Council has agreed or supported to add a fifth bottom line, which is ensuring that our water and wastewater supplies meet a quality that is required of them through the drinking water standards and the discharge consents. Currently, there are challenges in that area for Council. So we're working through a process that all councils have been given, which is 8 weeks from the beginning of August to formulate up any questions that we have on the reform process, and get those back to central government through the Department of Internal Affairs and Local Government New Zealand to ask questions on the process and the reform process itself. So we socialised the first tranche of questions with Council on Tuesday, a workshop yesterday, and got support to share those with DIA and LGNZ, Local Government New Zealand, and they'll be on the website as well. So that presentation and all the questions that we're going back to ask the government about the reform process will be there as well, so you can read through those. But they're really drilling into some of the details of the reform, and I think Council's been and Angela and Councillor Murphy can sort of add to this if they wish, really sensible in saying, well, we can't make and have a position until we know the facts, and we can't just jump in and say yes or no, or we're opting in or opting out without actually understanding it. So, you know, to a degree, there's some that have decided to make that decision. They must have more information than we have, or have various reasons for doing that. But I think our Council's been eminently sensible in saying, let's answer these questions first and foremost and understand it. The financial data that has been supplied with government has funded an external consultant to help councils understand that. Our consultant came and worked with us, so that's not at a cost to council, and came back and said, well, actually, when we crunched the numbers and changed things around a little bit, there isn't any really financial, significant financial benefit. Council could deliver these same outcomes for sorry, I'm just getting a cup of tea thrust at me through the window. Could deliver these same benefits standalone for a similar cost. So what are the other benefits of reform? That's one of our key questions, is going back to them. Bearing in mind that the financial analysis that got undertaken for the government was done by the Water Industry Commission in Scotland, and is big and complicated and complex. And again, I won't speak for any financial people, but it's pretty hard to get your head around and boil it all down. So the government has got this view, and I think it's starting to emerge that if opt-in, opt-out seems to be drifting out of the focus, and you know, for example, if Christchurch doesn't come into this, then is this entity D really valid and viable? So, I mean, that's just one of our questions as well. That says if they're not in, you know, is it an opt-in or an opt-out process? So I guess we're working through that and just asking that question as well. But it's really hard to try and distill this down. You live and breathe it, and you're working hard on it a couple of times a week and for a few hours, and talking to council and sharing information. It's hard to distill it all down, but the information will be on the website, and I think what would be really good is if people have a look at that, and I mean, I think we'd really appreciate if you guys had a look at it and said, I've read it and it doesn't make sense, and we go, fantastic, let's make sense of it. In a proactive way, because I'm sure there'll be people that will read it and say it doesn't make sense, and you guys have this and that and everything else. But you know, if you can have a look at what's going up, I think it's tomorrow, Angela, from memory, that'll be made available, and guys are working hard behind the scenes. Council's still pretty keen on running community consultation and engagement at least, and feedback as we go through the process. But I mean, you boil it all down, I think, look, government's keen as to get this across the line. I think it's going to happen. We just need to make sure it happens in the best way for Mackenzie District Council, that's residents, ratepayers, travelling along and alongside to a certain degree, but not connected, is the regulatory reform of the water industry. So in December this year, the new Water Services Bill will be enacted, and that's got the same standards associated with it as in place now, but it mandates compliance with those, and quite significant penalties for non-compliance, and that comes into force in December. It puts significant onus on council officers to ensure compliance, and I guess that's driven by a lot of years of non-compliance and a lot of years of underinvestment by councils across the country in the water infrastructure. There's 140 to 180 billion dollars worth of underinvestment in New Zealand and its three waters, and it's pretty hard. I mean, I've been in this business for 25 years for local authorities and water, and that's not, and you know, they're not over exaggerating that. There's a lot of work to do. This council has a lot of work to do in its water infrastructure. You know, we've got 8 million to spend in Fairlie on the water supply. We've got money to spend in Tekapo and Twizel on water and wastewater treatment. So not $1 billion, obviously, but a reasonable chunk of change to spend. And we have compliance issues. None of our treatment plants meet drinking water standards, or none of our wastewater treatment plants meet the discharge consent requirements. So there's work to be done. I'm not sure if there's anything else to add, Angela or Councillor Murphy, if there's anything else to add.
I think that's a really comprehensive update, Tim. Just to say that, you know, there's so much information going around and there's so many meetings happening that it's really difficult to digest all the information. There's also some information that's missing. So while they've given us some basic information, we don't have a lot of detail around how the governance is going to be set up, what kind of voice we're going to have, you know, how they're going to prioritise their money, you know, their capital to invest into infrastructure. How do we make sure that we get a fair share? How do we make sure that we cater for growth? So there's a whole lot of questions. The more you dig into it, the more questions you find. But I think one of the things that we've got to realise is that the government has signalled that they are changing the standards in terms of water, and they are changing the compliance regime. So we don't have a choice. The status quo is not suitable. We know it's going to have impacts, especially on the small rural supplies. I guess we're working our way through that. As Tim has said, a lot of time gets devoted into that. We've got a consultant and a person working full-time on that, and they brief council weekly. There'll be information on the website, and we will engage with people. We will engage with the community as and when we have more information.
Thank you, Angela. Matt, was there anything you wanted to add to your side, from your side?
No, other than just to reiterate what's already been said, it's a hugely complex issue, extremely time-consuming, and the council's approach has very much been to gather information and not make any knee-jerk reactions. And that's an approach that that council fully supports. And as you just heard then, a very brief summary from Tim. He could talk about it all day to you. The best advice is for anybody looking for an update is to jump onto the website and to have a read of the most recent activity, because it's changed so much since day one, and it's continuing to change at a very fast pace. So it's quite challenging trying to keep everybody current and up to date, but yeah, I support the approach that's being taken, and it's just a huge topic that we really need to fully understand before we make any decisions.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Tim, for that comprehensive update. We'll monitor the council website, and once those links are live, we'll also socialise the conversation through the community board channels. We'll just push out notification of those links going live as well, so that other residents can be aware. But thank you for that, and thanks, Tim. Obviously a topic close to your heart. Thank you. Lakeside maintenance tidy up. So just quickly to touch on that, we had the workshop last time as part of the last meeting, as part of the community board meeting. Community board met thereafter. We re-looked Katie's plan, made a few suggestions, minor changes, priorities. I think, if I remember correctly, that was fed back to Tim and to Katie. So Tim, fair to assume that other than the land ownership matters we've spoken about earlier, that those considerations have been considered. Is there a final plan then, subject to obviously the land ownership issues, that will be distributed in due course?
Yeah, there certainly will be, Mr. Chair. We'll just finalise these this land package issue and then issue some final sort of drawings that just says this is what we've got. All those, any issues, quickly let us know, and I don't think we'll wait for Waka Kotahi. I think we'll just try and get out there. I don't imagine the dock issue being significant, but look, I could be wrong. It's just hard to understand why we would have transferred it to them unless they wanted it for some particular reason. And I'm just a bit worried that if we raise it, we'll end up in a different conversation around what's on it already, which is part of the car park and the road down to the boat ramp.
So is it fair to assume, Tim, that we'll have that before the next community board meeting?
That'd certainly be the intention, unless something goes not to plan with that conversation. But then we'll let you know if that doesn't, if something goes awry, we'll let you know and possibly just move the pathway somewhere different.
Thank you, Tim. Chris, anything from your side on that topic? Sorry, Chris, can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry. No, thank you. Just the sooner we can move forward, the better.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Carol? Okay, and Matt? All good. Great. Thank you, team. Right, so school hall charges, we've reached a resolution on that one. The other matter under general was the squash court MOU, and really, Tim, just wanted to know if there's been any movement at all since our last meeting.
So no, we've taken, I've got the squash court MOU where we've pushed that sports requirement into the strategies. They're just a bit delayed coming out. We've got a priority list that we were hoping to get to this meeting, but just didn't have time to get that priority listing out so we can have a conversation about what's the critical things to do over the next 3 years, and I think 4 to 10. So there is a list that's been generated. So we'll bring that back and it should sit inside that.
Thank you, Tim. Matt, any comments from your part on that topic?
No, only in that, and I have expressed my views already to council staff in this regard, that this is an item that needs to remain in the forefront when we're looking at planning and funding in the long-term plan. It is something that the community board has met about and discussed over many years, and I feel it's really important that those list items that the community board came up with in terms of priorities to be included in this long-term plan are considered fully, and that we don't find that items are dropping off the radar and disappearing into the big hole, and this is one of those items. So we need to just keep on top of this and have it tracked.
Thank you, Matt. Carol, anything from your side? Okay. Thank you. Drinking water concerns, I think we've had that conversation, and thank you to Jeff for his report back on that matter today. And Chris, I'll also ask you if you could just disseminate that information to the parties that you're aware of that raised that as well. The other matter under general is around scattered signage appearing on street poles. And we're really referring to some of the directional signage and signage of real estate companies that seems to be attached to council assets. Arlene, are you able to speak to that matter?
I have referred it using a service request to Mr. Offen, who is the compliance person, and I haven't heard back from him. I'm not sure if he's working at the moment due to the lockdown, but I'm sure that once the lockdown's over, he'll be back on board.
Right, yeah. So just a bit of history there as well. The same matter was referred previously, and Mark did definitely respond to it. He was in telephonic contact with me. He actually went and physically removed the signs himself. But they've reappeared once more. So I'll touch base with Mark on that matter. Thank you, Arlene. There's also an email from Scott McKenzie regarding the black judder bars and the existing car parks. Matt, it's a matter that we spoke about at the last meeting. Just reading through that report and through Scott's email, and thank you to Scott for the time he spent on that. It would appear evident that the real issue is one of lighting. And certainly from my perspective, I think once the tavern is rebuilt and Reflections restaurant is back up and running, one would hope that there'll be, some level of lighting emanating from those buildings that will improve visibility. And if not, I tend to feel that maybe what we should be looking at that time then is lighting, as opposed to temporary solutions of painting judder bars. That's just going to become a maintenance nightmare. I'm not sure if there's any other comments from the team on that one. Matt?
Yeah, I'd agree with your observations there, and I think it would be sensible. Why would we not have some permanent lighting solution around town as we do around our residential subdivisions, even if they are a similar bollard type with low light emitting? There's very little around the village centre itself, and so I think that probably would be more sensible than trying to do any other short-term remediation work.
Thank you, Matt. Brian, was there anything you wanted to add from your side, Brian, just on that topic?
No, not really. If Scott's addressed it, no, I haven't got anything more to add. Sorry.
Thank you, Brian. So what I'll do is Arlene just ask you if we can just keep that visible on the action list, and I'm sure that as the build eventuates, that problem might resolve itself. Just while we're on item 5.5, can I also ask at this time, Matt, if there's anything from your perspective in terms of a councillor update?
Nothing that hasn't been covered. We have continued via Zoom with our weekly workshops and meetings since lockdown. So we haven't operationally, from a governance point of view, been affected by this latest outbreak. Yeah, obviously the pressure is always there from a council point of view. They're very busy. And we're continuing to work through some really quite big projects and issues, and I'll keep you updated with anything specific if upon request, I guess, rather than trying to give you a brief breakdown of what we've been covering, because there's an awful lot.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. Well, we're at 4:15 now, so what I suggest we do is divert our attention now to the item 5.6. the Community Board action list, and let's work our way through that. Was there anything else just before I switch over to the action list? Chris, from your side, anything more in general? Not Carol?
There was just a note under the judder bars about the chamber contract, an update regarding the status of that.
Yes, thank you. So Arlene, are you able to talk to that?
Yes, I looked in our filing system and discovered the latest contract was signed on the 28th of June, and that's a contract with the Chamber to provide one-on-one support for businesses and also webinars. So that appears to be working at the moment. I wasn't sure what prompted the inquiry, so I didn't know what else to look for. Is there any questions you'd like me to take back on that?
Carol, any particular question from your side other than that status update?
So there is a contract of sorts still in place, and the Chamber will remain connected with the Council as a conduit for the next 12 months, just different from what was before.
Yes, there is a contract in place. I'm not aware of the history, so I don't know how it would differ. And I know the Chamber is providing regular reports back to Council on the work it's doing, and those are being attached to the Council agendas or which committee? I think it comes under the Commercial and Economic Development Committee. So it is, the Chamber's still providing regular reports on what it's doing for Council. So I don't see any changes at that level at the moment.
That sounds good. Matt, is there any noticeable differences in the delivery or expectation?
No, none at this stage. The contract was extended till the end of the year in its current form, at which point it'll be reviewed again. So nothing's changed since our last little update, really. And the Council will remain full paid members to the Chamber themselves at the highest level, and then obviously work together to provide these other services, which we're doing so already. So there is certainly a relationship there that is being maintained, and will continue to be so into the future, even after the end of this year, for sure.
I think it would be really good to communicate that to the business community.
Okay, is there does it seem apparent out there in the business community that we've cut our ties with them completely?
No, but there was lots of talk about it, an expectation that the contract was being terminated, and I think it would be quite good to clarify that it hasn't been. Perhaps talk with Ray and Wendy. They might be able to put out some kind of indication of how things are sitting.
Yeah, okay. There was a wee paragraph that I saw. It was probably in one of our presented in one of our meetings, actually, that I think we could probably use, which you could possibly distribute through the community board page or a business forum, which summarises, I guess, where we're at moving forward. Yes. It's just a real, okay.
Maybe through Tekapo Business and Promotions.
Would that not be a communication that would be best served by Chris Clark as Council Communications Advisor, and then shared by the community board pages?
I was just going to suggest, sorry, Carol, I don't mean to speak over you. I was just going to suggest maybe, Arlene, if we make a note to ask Leanne, who sort of manages, I think, that part of the business, to provide an update that the community board can share with its business, with the business community, or something along those sorts of lines, so it can then go through Chris. Leanne's got her finger on the pulse of this one. She'll be the best one to talk to, to get a statement out on the status and all those bits and pieces. I mean, I'm not that close, much like Councillor Murphy. I sit in those presentations, but Leanne does the day-to-day stuff, so that might be a best action.
I'll show Leanne the recording of this meeting so she knows what it is we're looking for.
Thank you, Arlene. Thanks, Tim. Matt?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Arlene. Just as Carol was suggesting there, it's probably just a statement of reassurance that we're maintaining a relationship into the future with them.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks, Carol.
Thank you.
Right, so we'll move on to page 29, the community board action list, and we'll just work through those top to bottom. The first matter, proposed shared pathway on the Tekapo walk front. Tim, is there anything to report on that one?
You're still muted, Tim.
Sorry. So that's just part of that wider program of work. So we'll just carry on with that one and chip it out as we go.
Right. Okay. And the status on that one was still that part of the pathway was going to be wider.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same. So status quo. Yep.
Yep.
Right. Tekapo Western Car Park. The issue there, I think Carol's very close to this one as well, was around painting, road marking painting, and also signage. I know the painting has been done once again, but there's concern again that it's starting to fade and fail, and signage is still missing. Is that correct, Carol?
That's correct. I would like to know if there's going to be any movement in regard to signage at all. Exit signs, no exit signs. There's not been any definitive feedback from Scott about that. And
yeah, let's see. We after the last meeting, or potentially the meeting before, went back and asked MB if we could transfer the funds from the car park behind the pub that we had funding for into that car park. They came back and said no. Unfortunately, it was worth a go, but yeah, so that was sort of kibosh, having some funds to tidy things up. And I mean, all we can do really, all we have funds for at the moment is minor sort of tidy up, repainting. Can certainly raise the and Arlene maybe raise the signs as or note it down as a service request. So I can put another service request and track that through for making sure the signs are right. But a major and tidying up some of the peripheral areas will come through with the lakefront tidy up work. But the car park itself is a big space, and to do work in there we need reasonable amount of funds, and we don't have it. I mean, I absolutely understand your point. It's a very confusing car park, but it's just trying to understand, you know, the only thing we can do is mark it. And with the current markings in place, getting rid of those and remarking it really needs a reseal, and the reseal is a big job. So you all of a sudden you start to work through all that, but we can certainly make sure the signs are all appropriate and tidied up. I was hoping that I could get the funds from the other car park through. We did ask the builder of the pub to contribute towards the reseal of the car park behind the pub, but he declined. So
I think there are no signs, Tim, and that's the problem. I think what we're asking for is an exit sign and a no exit.
Okay. Yep. No worries. If we put that on a service request, we should be able to get that sorted pretty quickly.
Okay, that would help.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Tim. Right. Tekapo walkway from Simpson Lane. I think we've just kept that on the action list. We understand that that's currently a low priority item, as there's less tourist traffic and foot traffic at the moment. But certainly it's still a requirement. Carol, there was no further conversation you're aware of with Scott or anybody else on that?
No, I think in regard to the other work that Katie was doing, any kind of egress from the campground end to the Foursquare dropped off the revised plan. So I think we've pushed back a little bit on that to see if we can get some kind of pathway through to the Foursquare. I mean, it's this really, but this is not going to happen. I mean, it can't at the moment. It's just too difficult.
Is it on the sorry, I'm going to try and share my screen again, but I think it's on that drawing, isn't it? Or have I got the wrong? There's a little footpath formed up there. Asphalt footpath, but that's from the car park that's from the car park to Foursquare, sorry.
Yeah, this was the one that was going to run in front of the council-owned buildings, opposite Peppers, down Lakeside Drive, across Simpson Lane.
Yeah.
So perhaps that conversation, we need some clarity from Katie whether she's included any kind of directional information at all, pathway.
So sorry, Carol. So just summarise that for me? So what's the next step there? I just missed that.
So the Tekapo walkway from Simpson Lane to the main car park. That doesn't sound right, does it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's just a little bit, but okay. Yeah. So we understood that was on hold because a pathway appeared on Katie's plan, but then in the most current edition of that, it's not there anymore. It's gone. There was a pathway that was going to go in front of the old YHA and book Tekapo to connect with Foursquare, but it's disappeared. So at the moment, there doesn't appear to be any kind of pathway from that western end of town to the Foursquare at all. I'm not quite sure how we're going to, what do you do with this?
So in that plan we sent back to Katie, was there any provision on there in terms of...
We asked about it there, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Because it had disappeared.
Right.
Yeah.
But in regard to the action list, then that's fine. This one here, nothing more to be done.
Nothing. So we'll keep visibility of that and review that in terms of the final plan that we get back from Katie.
I think.
Yeah.
So.
Brian?
Yeah, I'm just saying that's probably the best scenario for that one. Yeah, I think you will have picked that up from your notes and your feedback.
Thank you, Brian. Right, so Diashak Drive Reserve, we've had an update on that matter and we understand that that work will continue when it's able to, pending alert levels. Any other comments or questions on that, Chris, from your side, the Diashak Reserve? No, you're okay, Carol? Okay, good. Right. A lengthy one. Brian?
I would just say we need to get used to calling it Makatua Reserve.
Yes, you did right. We've got the approval to do that now, so thank you. Yeah, on that note, it would be, I think it might be a nice idea to actually share that news with the school, and particularly with the students whose naming suggestion was accepted. So it might be an idea just from a community board perspective, and Matt, even if you would like to be the counsellor in attendance for that, we could also obviously invite Mayor Graham, but he's possibly very busy. But if he can't make it, if you could be the representative from council, and we could just do something at school when school's back in class. Thank you. Tekapo lakefront improvements, Tim has spoken to that. Any other questions that are not answered, team, from Carol or Chris or Matt? Happy with that, so we'll move on. Barbara Hay Reserve, Shaz is normally our subject matter expert on that one, but is any other questions from the team? Brian, anything further from your side other than what's on the action list?
I think I covered it in my report. With a little bit more work to do in the spring, a little bit more planting of the steeper banks, a little bit of a retaining wall we're adding at the top of the steps, and I had some feedback from Sharon that the rabbits are back to the rabbits are causing a problem. So we're going to do some rabbit-proof fencing around the planting, which, in talking with my colleague Chris, that was apparently the original intention, but I might have deferred that inadvertently to see how it'd go without having to do the fencing. So we're probably back to having to do the fencing, unfortunately. So that's going to happen. And then again, with the grassing and things will happen in the next month or so. So, yep. Where that's at.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you for your work on that. Arlene, do we have any update at all, or are you aware of any update regarding the new lights? Or I think last time we were waiting on stock or supply. Is there any update from council's perspective on the situation around lighting?
Want me to answer that for you, Arlene? So they're getting rolled out. So my understanding is the new lights are starting to appear in Tekapo. So the easiest way to tell is look at a light, and if it's got a black sort of knob sticking out the top of it, it's a new one. And Twisel's done, and my understanding was Twisel, Tekapo, and then Fairly. The fittings were still a challenge for some parts of Tekapo, obviously with the dark sky, but the different types of bollards that are around the town. But my understanding, those challenges are all done and dusted. So I'll double check on that, but we shouldn't have any residual issues left there.
Thank you, Tim. That's great news. Tekapo Hall Kitchen, and yes, we're all aware that the new Celtos access control key tag system is in place, so that's great. That's a great development. Just wondering why we've still got this action on the action list. Carol, is that because there's still work to be done in the kitchen, to the best of your knowledge?
It's probably to do with the stocking of the kitchen still.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure about the stocking. That sort of was an issue that occurred. I would have understood that that's been completed, and there's certainly nothing more I'm working on in that regard. The only outstanding issue there is really the custodian type role, where you've suggested it'd be useful to have local lady Angie Taylor set up to do that, and I haven't progressed that, and we have a similar need to do that at some sort of arrangement at Fairley and Twizel halls as well. So talking with other colleagues about progressing that potentially this week. Yeah, that's where that's at, which is not very far, unfortunately. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. So Arlene, can we keep that on the action list, please, Arlene? And then we'll do a touch point on that next meeting. And Carol, maybe you can also, Carol, if you do speak to Angie again, I know you often talk to Angie on this topic, which she's passionate about, just understand whether the kitchen stock situation is where we hoped it would be from previous conversations. Tekapo Tavern site, I think we're all pretty much aware that contract has been awarded and work has commenced, and obviously just been shut down for now due to COVID alert levels, but it's all well underway. And I think the last conversation with the builders, they were certainly aiming for early next year. I'm not sure what the situation will be now with the current situation, but great to see that progressing. Tekapo proposed sports facility squash club. Again, we've just kept that on the action list for visibility, but Tim has already spoken to that, so I don't believe any further conversations required on that one. And the next matter, I'm on page 37, relates to Tekapo rabbit control, and again, we've spoken to that matter and the decision there around a community-led initiative. So we will gather outside of this meeting to formulate a plan on that. Tekapo bike stands, so that's the bottom of page 37. Brian, did you have anything further to add to that?
No, we haven't really progressed that other than the conversations we've had already. I think it more comes down to just deciding where we put them, which might involve direction from you or have a better feeling from that, community board members, or again, have a look on site one day. At some point when we're organising a walk around and try and select some sites. It's an option on there for e-bikes. The feedback and discussions I've had with various people about e-bike charging stations is that not that worthwhile for bike stands. They're really designed for accommodation because of the time it takes to charge the e-bike, and so the cost and difficulty of installing charging stands is probably not something we want to pursue, I don't believe. It's really just standard stands, and I think we've decided before you like that A2O design that we've used in Twizel particularly. They either just need to, not sure where they were built or whether who made them, but probably get them copied by an engineering firm. So it's really just a location issue, which you sort that out.
Chris, am I correct that you've had a first draft that's identifying locations? Just unmute yourself, Chris.
Oh, sorry about that. I think it was, I think we sent some emails, Brian. We were looking at a mix of the long style ones consistent with the Tekapo Regional Park, and maybe a few of those Elks to Ocean ones scattered around. But that's kind of detail at the moment. And I think we came up with a few potential locations, and yes, I agree that we could fine tune that as part of a walk around with Brian, perhaps, as we approach the lakefront development as well.
Sounds great, Chris. That's what we'll do.
Yeah.
Perfect. Is that in order, Brian?
Yep, that's good.
Thank you. Top of page 38, the grant application that's been carried and moved. So I'm sure, so that Arlene, that could probably be removed from the action list at this time. And the next matter, Tekapo School use of hall, we'll just keep that on the action list for visibility, and hopefully by next meeting we'll have a resolution on that and we can remove that also. The final matter on the action list on the top of page 39 relates to black judder bars. And again, we've spoken to that matter in terms of the hope that the lighting will resolve part of that problem. So we are at the end of the action list. Was there any other actions out of general that we need Arlene to add to the action list for us? Matt?
Yes, I think it's going to be really important moving forward in order for us to get a result out of the CCTV conversation that we've been having over the over quite a long period of time now, to have this added onto the action list. We've spent quite a lot of time discussing this, and the owner, if you like, the staff member who was looking after this wee project at council has left council, and whilst it has been passed on, again with work loadings and time restraints and other items which are at the forefront going on at the moment, I'm fearful that this CCTV will keep on dropping off as it has done, and I'm getting a little bit frustrated that we're not getting anywhere with it, other than it seems we are unable to obtain a quote from a provider, was the last thing I heard. So I think this firstly needs to be put on the action list, and then I think it also needs to be reinforced by the community board to council that this is an item that we feel very strongly about. And then hopefully the discussion can be continued, and funding can be sought so that we can progress it.
Matt, am I correct that this was one of the items that was identified for the annual plan as well? I know when we last spoke 2 meetings ago, I think Tim actually spoke to this, Tim Hardy, and I think it was one of the items that was going to be identified on the annual plan. Tim, was that correct?
Long-term plan.
Long-term plan. Sorry, long-term plan.
Look, it was when it was in excess of $60,000 or $70,000. It's the information that Tim Mulcox handed over has got a $16,000 price tag on it. So the process was to look to existing budgets to source that from. So I've got that. One of the team is chasing up with AOTS Security about where they're at. Try and do this, it's better. We have a quote from AOTS Security that we got on the 30th of July this year for, sorry, just scrolling through it, just over 14,000, excluding just for installing camera and mounting and travel and accommodation and all sorts of other bits and pieces. And as I say, one of the teams getting in touch with AOTS Security to just make sure we've got the details that we can share. So
yeah, just one concern I'd table is it almost sounds too cheap, and I just wonder if it still meets the criteria that was originally set in consultation with the local police around license plates and number recognition. It just doesn't sound like at that price at all.
I would. Arlene's got her hand up, so maybe that's useful. Look, I'm just picking up the quote, so I wouldn't be able to tell you whether whatever it is that we've got a quote for is what was initially scoped out. Sorry, I don't understand it enough to, say of a 2 megapixel H4 IRPTZ with 30 times optical zoom and wiper is what you were after.
Arlene?
I've just opened up my action list. This was an action on the community board's list for a while and it got signed off. So I just thought I'd quickly let you know what the last few entries were on that. It might help. It was Allied Alarms was contacted. They made a visit on site and met with the community board and they will prepare a design and quote. And then the next item in January this year, the cost of this is likely to be more than $60,000 and therefore requires more than one quote under Council's procurement rules. So we need to organise a second quote and then the amount needs to be included in the long-term plan. And then Tim Mulcock signed off the action because he said that he had instructed inclusion in the long-term plan for this, and that was the final entry.
Thanks, Aline. That's where I remember it. Matt?
Yeah, so this is the point that I come back to. That obviously there's been some cuts through this long-term planning process, these items haven't been marked down or noted or even communicated to that effect. So I guess I just want to raise a bit of a flag that this is an important item as far as our community is concerned, but not only our community. A good CCTV system is going to benefit the entire district in terms of tracking criminals coming in and leaving. And so the specification of the system that we had we'd initially approved, whilst expensive, may have appeared to be the gold-plated system. It actually just represents the standard that is required in order to do its job effectively. And what's happened is I've been told verbally from Tim, who's now left, Tim Mulcock, that it's been watered down and simplified in order to try and maintain some sort of affordability. And that in itself, I wasn't particularly happy with, especially given that it wasn't communicated even that the need for it to have been watered down and why we can't include it in the long-term plan. So this is, this is just an item that I feel the community will need to get behind and probably vocalise the importance of it to council.
Just look, I'm just flicking through and don't quote me on that, just flicking through some of the emails and that Tim's sent me and I've sent on for Amy to follow up. But essentially we've got two quotes, one that won't tell you if you've got a boy in a blue pants and a red hat and number plate recognition, and one with, and it's 20K for the one with number plate recognition and the boy in the red hat, blue shorts with white pants, is how the supplier has put it. And that was whatever, like I say, I'm just whipping through it quickly. So it looks like the quotes are there for number plate recognition, but if you just give us a bit of a chance to run through that, as I say, Amy, who works in my team, is talking or chasing this with Aotea security to just get clarity on that. Pop it back on the action list. It does look like one of the quotes is for cameras with number plate recognition and enough optical whatevers to be able to say it was the boy in the, as it quotes, red pants and white hat. And so we'll just wade through that, and if it's 20K, then it's easy to get the dispensation that we need to go to one supplier.
And Tim, in that instance, where would the funding source be? Would that be the township fund?
We'd look to look at where that funding came from in terms of what's the appropriate existing operational funds that we could draw from, what the community board might look to some of their funds to draw from, and put it on. It just, as Councillor Murphy's indicated, it's a challenging LTP. Whilst 20K is 20K, it's still $20,000. So we just need to look at what's the priority across our operational spend and community board spends, and prioritise as we would with anything else.
Thank you. So Aline, if you could add that back on the action list, please. And I think when the project started, Matt, myself and the local policemen were involved with that. So Tim, if it's of any use to yourself or Amy, having to pick up the reins on that one now, if there's anything we can do to help or support that, please let us know. Happy to do so.
Well, there will be, because I've only got the quotes, and we'll chase up when they can supply them, and then you guys will know where you were putting them and what they were doing.
Yeah.
I know there is some policy stuff that needs to be sorted, and some mechanical things around, just having sat on the peripheral of these CCTV type, camera type operations. There's a whole bunch of things that need to be sorted. So I'd need to go and try and get Amy to check that that's all done as well, that we've got the right, they go in the right place, the right people are accessing them, etc., etc. Like you can't pop it in your house, for example. So and I don't know that either, so I'll have to track that down. But I'm assuming Tim would have done some of that.
Thank you, Tim. Matt?
I think a good starting point, just to get Tim up to speed here, would be to find the initial design plan that was sent to Allied for quoting, which included the 4 cameras in the various spots that were identified by the policeman, myself, and Steve initially, and then to work backward from that. And I think what we'll find is the watered down version is a single camera in one of those locations, which we are unsure of because that information hasn't been shared with us. So we'd need to know those details, showing us the difference between the 2 options, the expensive option, which is the original plan that went out, and then obviously the watered down version, which will give us one single number recognition plate, probably outside of the police station or the challenge, I imagine is what they've gone to. But let's start at the where we started, for Tim's sake, with the original design and of the full scope of the system, and then figure out the funding thereafter. I think would be a sensible way to go. Would you agree, Mr. Chair?
I would agree. And Tim, would you agree with that also?
No, that's fine. I'll try and track down that information. Tim was pretty good at putting stuff into Laserfish, so I'll go and find that. If I can't find it, we'll just come and have a conversation. But there's 2 cameras. Yeah. Looks like they're indicating that they're in the challenge site, one pointing one way, one pointing the other. So that's like in a 5-minute read of some emails while you're talking. That's the gist of what I've got. So
thank you, Matt. Thank you, Tim. And I've got all the original emails as well. So if you need those, I can forward those to you. No problem at all. Right. Any other matters to be added to the action list? We're at 10 to 5. Nothing else? Okay. So if there's no Matt, yes.
Sorry, just one item which I would just request maybe Arlene to stick on the agenda for next community board meeting would be to request an update on timing for the school road upgrade. Please.
School road.
Sorry, it's not school. It's
Arangi Crescent. Yeah, look, the contract.
Arangi Crescent footpath and roads realignment upgrade. Could we please have a timeline, a start date, and a timeline on that, please?
Yeah, and that we can get that. We're in the process of we were about to award it, then we're in lockdown. We're just not awarding contracts in lockdown. But it's pretty close, so that's easy peasy.
Thanks, Tim. Good
news. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Matt. Right, so just a quick whip around the table. Anything else, Matt? Chris? Carol?
Nothing from me.
Nothing. Right, so once again, a warm word of thanks to everyone for your time and attendance today and for the work that's continuing behind the scenes. And I'll declare the meeting closed. And Arlene, thank you for your work behind the scenes for organising the meeting.
You're welcome.
Have a great day further, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
Yes.
Have a good